The sunlit, picturesque coastlines of Southern California have long been romanticized as the ultimate symbol of American tranquility, where the gentle crash of Pacific waves meets the carefree laughter of locals and tourists alike. Santa Monica, with its iconic pier, sprawling sandy beaches, and vibrant seaside promenades, stands as a premier jewel of this coastal paradise, attracting millions who seek nothing more than a peaceful escape under the golden sun. It is a place where reality feels suspended, replaced by a cinematic haze of palm trees, ocean breezes, and upscale dining establishments that line the pristine avenues. On any given afternoon, the streets are filled with families strolling leisurely, couples enjoying the maritime air, and Hollywood elites looking to unwind away from the intense glare of studio lights. Among those seeking a quiet day of relaxation on one particular afternoon was acclaimed actress Amy Adams, a celebrated figure known globally for her immense talent, vulnerability, and striking presence on the silver screen. Accompanied by her husband, Darren Legallo, and her father, the family had just enjoyed a quiet meal at one of their favorite local restaurants, basking in the warmth of a perfect Californian day. There was absolutely no indication that this ordinary family outing was about to dissolve into a scene of absolute chaos and terror, or that the quiet afternoon would suddenly transform into a desperate, high-stakes battle for human survival. As they stepped out onto the sidewalk, the ambient sounds of the coast were instantly shattered by a chorus of panicked, blood-curdling screams that echoed through the air, completely shattering the idyllic atmosphere. Passers-by began to scatter in a frenzy of confusion and dread, their faces twisted in horror as they pointed toward a terrifying scene unfolding just yards away. Through the crowd, a man emerged, stumbling blindly along the pavement, while his frantic companions yelled out in sheer desperation that he was dying right before their eyes. The sheer contrast between the peaceful beachside setting and the sudden, violent eruption of human panic created an immediate sense of profound disorientation for everyone in the vicinity. Darren Legallo was the first in the group to process the terrifying visual reality of the situation, urgently calling out to his wife and father-in-law as he spotted the unmistakable, dark crimson fluid rapidly spreading across the scene. In that singular, frozen pocket of time, the thin veneer of Hollywood glamour vanished entirely, leaving a family of ordinary citizens standing face-to-face with a stark, life-or-death crisis that demanded immediate action. Before we dive deeper into the harrowing details of how this terrifying afternoon unfolded and explore the incredible instincts that took over, make sure to subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more compelling real-life stories and deep dives into the extraordinary lives of your favorite personalities. The atmosphere on the street grew increasingly heavy as the initial shock gave way to a chilling realization that a fellow human being was rapidly slipping away on the pavement. In moments of extreme trauma and unexpected violence, the human psychological response is entirely unpredictable, often causing bystanders to freeze in a state of paralyzed disbelief or flee the area out of a primal desire for self-preservation. The sight of massive blood loss and the raw, guttural cries of terrified witnesses can easily overwhelm the senses, making it nearly impossible for the average person to think clearly or take effective, constructive steps toward helping. Yet, as the crowd around them continued to panic, and the victim's friends spiraled into a state of hysterical helplessness, something remarkable occurred within Amy Adams and her father. Instead of retreating from the danger or waiting passively for emergency medical services to arrive, both individuals experienced an instantaneous surge of adrenaline that drove them directly toward the center of the crisis. This instinctive, unhesitating decision to run toward danger rather than away from it set a profound chain of events into motion, highlighting a deeply rooted capacity for empathy and courage under extreme pressure. The transition from being an observer of a peaceful coastal landscape to becoming an active participant in a brutal, bloody medical emergency is a psychological shift that few people are ever truly prepared to make. For an actress whose daily life is meticulously orchestrated on highly controlled film sets, surrounded by security, stunt coordinators, and medical professionals, the raw, unscripted brutality of the real world can be profoundly jarring. There were no directors to call a halt to the action, no special effects teams managing the crimson stains, and no second takes available if a mistake was made during these critical, fleeting seconds. Every single choice made in that immediate aftermath carried immense, irreversible weight, as the life of an unknown stranger hung precariously in the balance on a public sidewalk. As Amy Adams and her father closed the physical distance between themselves and the collapsing man, the true gravity and horrific nature of his injuries became devastatingly clear. The air was thick with the scent of metallic copper and ocean salt, a jarring combination that would forever burn itself into the memories of those who stood on the blood-splattered pavement that afternoon. The surrounding chaos seemed to fade into a dull roar as their focus narrowed entirely on the dying man, whose frantic movements and rapid blood loss signaled that time was running out at an alarming rate. It was a moment of profound vulnerability for everyone involved, a stark reminder of how quickly an ordinary, beautiful day can be violently upended by an act of unexpected malice. The unfolding drama on the Santa Monica streets serves as a powerful testament to the unpredictability of human existence, where the boundaries between safety and extreme peril are often razor-thin. This gripping incident, which remained a closely guarded personal memory for many years, only recently came to light, offering a rare and deeply intimate glimpse into the true character of a Hollywood icon when stripped of all fame and pretense. The sheer intensity of the event raises numerous questions about the nature of heroism, the strength of the human spirit, and the mysterious ways in which the paths of total strangers can become permanently intertwined through a single, chaotic event. As we prepare to examine the specific actions taken during those critical moments and explore the shocking aftermath that followed nearly a year later, the atmosphere remains thick with the memory of that fateful coastal afternoon. As the chaotic scene on the Santa Monica sidewalk reached a fever pitch, the sheer brutality of the situation became undeniably clear to Amy Adams and her father. The man stumbling through the panicked crowd had been brutally stabbed directly in the neck, a catastrophic injury that severed major blood vessels and presented an immediate, life-threatening crisis. In such a high-stakes scenario, a wound to the neck is among the most perilous imaginable, as the carotid artery and jugular vein sit just beneath the skin, meaning any deep laceration can lead to fatal exsanguination within a matter of mere minutes. The victim was bleeding profusely, his clothes quickly becoming soaked in a deep crimson fluid, while his companions were completely paralyzed by a state of hysterical freakout, screaming uselessly into the warm coastal air. The absolute panic of the victim's friends threatened to worsen the situation, as their frantic energy was causing the injured man to become increasingly terrified, driving his heart rate to dangerous levels. It was precisely at this critical juncture that the six-time Academy Award nominee and her father effectively assumed control of the entire environment, stepping into the center of the blood-splattered scene with an unbelievable level of composure. Recognizing that immediate physical intervention was the only way to prevent the man from bleeding to death on the pavement, Adams immediately shifted into an intensely focused, pragmatic mindset. While her father prepared to administer direct first aid to the gaping wound, Adams rushed to rustle up clean towels from a nearby establishment, demonstrating an incredible ability to think logically under immense psychological pressure. Returning swiftly with the materials, she handed them to her father, who used his physical strength and steady hands to apply heavy continuous pressure directly onto the man's neck injury in a desperate bid to slow down the terrifying loss of blood. While her father focused on the physical mechanics of stemming the flow, Adams dedicated herself entirely to managing the psychological state of the dying stranger. She sat directly beside the bleeding man on the hard ground, completely ignoring the horrific state of the scene around them, and began speaking to him in a remarkably calm, authoritative, and soothing tone. She looked directly into his panicked eyes and told him that he needed to calm his pulse rate down immediately, instructing him to take deep, controlled breaths in and out. With absolute clarity and focus, Adams explained to the fading victim that the more he struggled and panicked, the faster his heart would pump, which would cause him to bleed out much quicker. She commanded him to just lay down flat on the pavement, and she immediately worked to elevate his head and upper body to reduce the blood pressure localized around the severe neck laceration. This hyper-focused behavior from Adams was nothing short of miraculous, especially considering that she had arrived on the scene entirely after the violent attack had already occurred, leaving her with zero knowledge of whether the perpetrator was still lurking in the immediate vicinity. As she sat in the middle of the gore, administering life-saving psychological and physical support, her mind naturally began to formulate a theory about what could have possibly led to such a horrific eruption of violence in broad daylight. From the fragmented, frantic explanations she could make out from the victim's traumatized friends, a bizarre and tragic backstory began to take shape. It appeared that the group of friends had unexpectedly run into an old college acquaintance earlier that afternoon, an encounter that initially seemed like a joyous, nostalgic reunion. To celebrate the chance meeting, They had decided to have some alcoholic drinks together and had subsequently visited a local liquor store to purchase more supplies, planning to take the gathering back to someone's private residence to continue their catching up. However, for reasons that remain deeply shrouded in mystery and confusion, the old college friend experienced a sudden, severe psychological break or an unexplainable fit of absolute rage, completely freaking out without warning. In a shocking betrayal of past companionship, this individual produced a blade and plunged it into the victim's neck before fleeing into the surrounding urban landscape, leaving his former classmate to die on the concrete. Despite the terrifying implications of a violent attacker potentially being nearby, Adams never allowed her focus to waver for a single second, maintaining her icy composure as the minutes ticked by like hours before professional emergency medical services finally arrived. Her incredible ability to suppress her own natural fear and panic allowed her to deliver the exact physiological instructions necessary to keep the man's heart rate low enough to sustain his life until paramedics could take over. Once the flashing lights of the ambulance arrived and the medical professionals swept the victim away to a local trauma center, the actress and her family were left standing on the stained sidewalk, emotionally exhausted and completely uncertain of whether the stranger would survive the night. For nearly a year following that harrowing coastal afternoon, the entire incident remained a heavy, unresolved chapter in Adams' life, with no word on whether their frantic efforts had actually succeeded. The sheer weight of the memory lingered in the background of her mind as she returned to the demanding routines of her Hollywood career, filming intense scenes and preparing for major roles, yet always wondering about the fate of the man from Santa Monica. The psychological toll of intervening in a near-fatal stabbing is immense, often leaving individuals with lingering questions and a profound sense of vulnerability regarding the fragile nature of human existence. Adams did not seek media attention or public praise for her heroic actions that day, choosing instead to keep the experience private, a deeply personal moment of human connection, forged in the fires of an unexpected tragedy. The lack of closure served as a quiet, somber undercurrent to her daily life, a reminder of the anonymous stranger whose life had briefly but violently intersected with her own under the California sun. The passage of time slowly began to blur the sharpest edges of that terrifying memory, yet the fundamental questions remained unanswered, leaving an emotional void that only a definitive update could ever hope to fill. Little did she know that the universe was working in a truly bizarre, circular fashion, setting the stage for a mind-blowing, highly emotional confrontation that would take place in a completely different setting many months later. This unresolved tension, which hung over her personal life like an invisible cloud, defines the incredible complexity of real-world heroism, where there are rarely immediate answers or neat resolutions to the crises we stumble into. The dramatic architecture of this event highlights the profound impact that a single decision can have, demonstrating how a random act of courage can echo through time and space, ultimately leading to a revelation so stunning it would leave even a seasoned Hollywood veteran completely breathless. Almost a year had passed since that blood-splattered afternoon in Santa Monica, and the memory of the stabbing had settled into the quiet recesses of Amy Adams' mind, an extraordinary yet unresolved chapter in her life. The passage of time had brought her back into the familiar, bustling rhythms of high-end restaurants, red carpets, and demanding production schedules, far removed from the raw desperation of the coastal sidewalk. On a completely ordinary evening, while dining at a local restaurant, the fragile boundary between her past heroism and her present reality was shattered in a deeply emotional and unexpected way. A completely anonymous man slowly walked up to her table, cutting through the ambient chatter of the dining room, and looked directly at the acclaimed actress. With a quiet, conversational tone, he referenced the incident without immediately revealing his true identity, stating that he had recently heard a remarkable story about how she and her father had been present at the scene of a brutal stabbing. Adams, assuming this was merely another casual industry acquaintance who had caught wind of the bizarre rumor, smiled politely, and responded by saying it was so funny he had heard that story, prepared to offer a brief explanation. However, as she stopped speaking and took a much closer, focused look at the stranger standing directly before her table, an overwhelming shock of recognition washed over her whole being. The casual veneer of the restaurant encounter vanished in an instant as she stared into the eyes of the man and realized, with absolute certainty, that this was the exact same person whose neck wound her father had compressed while she actively fought to keep him alive. The profound realization hit her like a physical wave, prompting her to gasp out loud in absolute amazement, exclaiming that she could not believe it was actually him standing there, healthy and alive. The man, completely overcome with raw emotion, became visibly teary-eyed as he stood before the woman who had acted as his guardian angel during the most terrifying moments of his entire existence. In an incredibly beautiful and symbolic twist of fate, the surviving victim had brought his young son with him to the restaurant, allowing the child to see the faces of the people who had saved his father's life. It was an incredibly emotional, crazy confrontation that provided Adams with a profound sense of closure, validating every single chaotic, terrifying choice she and her father had made on that fateful afternoon. This breathtaking, real-life drama stands in stark contrast to the fictional worlds of suspense and terror that Adams frequently inhabits throughout her celebrated acting career. Interestingly, she chose to share this deeply personal confession during her promotional tour for her new television project, the critically acclaimed Apple TV Plus miniseries remake of Cape Fear. On this dark psychological thriller series, Adams stars alongside a phenomenal ensemble cast, including the incredibly talented Patrick Wilson and the commanding Javier Bardem. The narrative of Cape Fear follows Adams and Wilson as a pair of highly successful married attorneys whose affluent family is systematically terrorized by a dangerous, recently released convict, played with chilling intensity by Bardem. The antagonist harbors a deep, consuming hatred for the couple, blaming their legal defense choices for the severe conviction that ultimately sent him to a maximum security prison for 17 long years. This gripping miniseries represents the latest prestige adaptation of a classic American psychological story, drawing inspiration from both the original 1962 cinematic masterpiece starring Gregory Peck and Robert Mitchum, and the legendary 1991 cinematic remake directed by Martin Scorsese, which featured unforgettable, terrifying performances from Robert De Niro and Nick Nolte. The thematic parallels between her fictional work on Cape Fear and her real-life encounter with sudden violence are impossible to ignore, as both explore the fragile nature of safety and the terrifying speed with which an ordinary life can be thrust into chaos. The incredible story of her survival intervention was revealed during an appearance on the widely popular Smartless podcast, hosted by her close friends and fellow actors Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett. The episode itself was a fascinating mixture of deep vulnerability, Hollywood storytelling, and the trademark chaotic banter that has made the audio show a global phenomenon. In a bizarrely humorous contrast to Adams' heavy, life-or-death revelation, the Monday broadcast also featured a remarkably tense, hilarious interaction between the hosts that quickly caught the attention of listeners. During a comedic segment of the interview, Will Arnett completely snapped at his co-host and longtime friend Jason Bateman for relentlessly pestering him with deeply intrusive, absurd questions regarding his past relationship with his ex-wife, the brilliant comedic actress Amy Poehler. Bateman had jokingly demanded to know if Arnett would ever feel comfortable performing normal bodily functions in front of his former spouse, prompting Arnett to sharply shut down the line of questioning in a moment of mock outrage that perfectly encapsulated the show's unpredictable dynamic. This light-hearted, absurd bickering served as a fascinating counterweight to the incredibly heavy, profound narrative that Adams had delivered just moments earlier, highlighting the unique ability of the human experience to swing wildly between the ridiculous and the sublime. Ultimately, the story of Amy Adams, her father, and the anonymous stabbing victim serves as a beautiful, enduring reminder of the power of instinctual human empathy. It proves that when the trappings of fame, celebrity, and Hollywood artifice are stripped away entirely, the core of human decency and courage can still shine through in the darkest, most unexpected moments. Her willingness to sit in the blood-splattered streets of Santa Monica, holding the hand of a dying stranger and guiding his breathing, is a powerful testament to the fact that true heroes do not just exist in the movies. The emotional restaurant reunion, filled with tears and the quiet gratitude of a father and his son, provides a perfect cinematic resolution to a real-life nightmare, ensuring that the legacy of that terrifying afternoon will forever be defined by survival, connection, and the triumph of the human spirit over random violence.